Well, good morning, everybody. We're so glad that you are joining us today for this very special webinar. We have two very special guests with us today, Chaplain Colonel Keith Croom and his wife Kelly. They are going to be sharing their Chaplain Corps story, the journey that they've been on for close to 30 years in the Chaplain Corps. They're going to share some of the lessons learned, some of the great blessings, some of the challenges that they've had. And those of you that have brought your spouses along, we're really glad because you're going to get to hear a very unique perspective this morning. We're going to get started here in just a second. Before we jump into it, I want to just give a few kind of rules of engagement, some admin notes here. So I'm going to ask you all to keep your mics muted. If I go through and I'm muting you, please don't take any offense at it. We're just trying to cut down on the ambient noise. If you would, we're going to have a time of question and answer at the end here. We're going to save plenty of time for it. So if you have questions for either one of the Crooms, please feel free to type those in the chat box, and then we will go through and we're going to answer as many of those as possible. I'm going to ask that I know as I'm looking through the list of the people that are on here today, that we have a lot of folks that are considering a call to ministry, but we also have several people that are chaplains, our former chaplains. I see some senior ranking people in there. So I'm going to very politely and respectfully ask you not to answer any questions that people post. In the two adjacent rooms over here, I've got the experts that have all of the great, perfect answers. They're going to jump in and they can answer any of the technical questions that you have about the Chaplain Corps, about processes, and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm going to ask you to let the experts answer. I know a lot of things have changed even in the last 10 years since I came on active duty. So we want to make sure we're giving people the right answers. So thank you all very much for coming. And I would like to introduce Chaplain Croom and his wife Kelly. Chaplain Croom currently serves as the USASOC Command Chaplain. He has been in the Army for over 28 years. He has done some amazing things. He has gone to some of the premier schools in the Army, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about that. So Chaplain Croom, Mrs. Croom, thank you all so much for being a part of this morning. And I'm just going to turn it over to you and ask you if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about this journey that you guys were on in the Chaplain Corps.
Sure. I'm assuming everybody can hear us okay. So, and my wife will tell me I have a tendency to scream. And so if you see her nudging me like this, that's because I'm talking too loud. So I'll lower my voice a little bit, or you guys can plug your ears. But either way, hopefully you can hear us. First of all, Matt, thank you for allowing us to do this. This is our honor and our privilege to be able to do this. Kelly and I are super passionate about this ministry. It's a unique ministry, one like no other. And so we're excited to be doing this. And I see a lot of familiar names, few familiar faces. Mike Strom, I see Haster, Liskowski, great to see you. And just a plethora of other folks that I recognize. Thank you guys for being a part of this. And listen, our reason for doing this.
I saw the highlights.
Because we just really want to pass along to you guys how just the encouragement of being a part of a ministry that less than 1% of the nation are involved in, and certainly less than that become chaplains. And so we're pretty, even after 30 years of total time, we're still pretty fired up about this. So a little bit just about myself. Matt, you've got the bio, and I've come to understand that probably most people, if they want to know something about you, they can probably Google you and find more than I'm probably willing to say.
We do that.
Yeah, let's Google each other. But I'll just start by saying this, because I always like to know what's the skin in the game. Like, whoever these speakers are, what kind of skin do they really have in the game? So Let me just start by saying this. I was called into the ministry when I was 15, really young. There's two things I'm sure of: my salvation and my wife. And really, if you want to add a third one, and I lumped that in with my salvation experience, is my calling. And so 15 called into the ministry, 17 years old called into the Army chaplaincy. And the quick 2-minute version of that is, I was sitting in my first year of college and wondering, okay, Lord, I've agreed to go into the ministry, but I'm not going to speak. Don't like doing that. I'll take my F like a man when it comes to, getting up in front of people and communicating. And Lord, you'll work that out, but I'm in on my terms, probably like we've all done in certain aspects. 17 years old, I saw a guy coming out of the dorm room by the name of Rico Balazora. And I didn't know it, but he was a Navy Reserve religious programmer, which is our version of religious affairs or chaplain assistant. And I don't know why the Lord spoke to me then, but he did. And it was very clear. The Holy Spirit said, you're not supposed to go in the Navy, but you're supposed to go into the Army. And he had his whites on with a Bible in his hand. And that's, the Lord just spoke to me. And so since I was 17, we've prepared to do this. And now, decades later, we're still very passionate about doing that. Much longer story in that, but that's just a little bit of myself and our calling, to just kind of start things off. So that's the premise. That's the energy we have when we bring to the table talking about this calling as a chaplain. So Matt, I don't want to talk forever, so I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, so you ran into a Navy chaplain there. So what ended up shifting you from? And we're glad that it happened. I've been on some ships before, and they're very cramped, and if you've got claustrophobia like me, it's miserable. What shifted you from that possibility of the Navy to Army?
But that's a great question. And I asked myself that because, and just to clear the record, Rico was not a chaplain yet. He ended up being a Navy chaplain and retiring. But at that point, he was a junior enlisted,
religious programmer?
Yeah, religious programmer, but I don't even know what they call junior enlisted Navy folks. So, and he was excited about that. He was called to do that. I think part of it was, Matt, that my dad was an old Army dude. He was a Green Beret, a special ops guy. And I was raised with that mentality. I thought every dad was like that type of thing. And so I gravitated towards the Army. And this is a philosophy of ministry thing. And Kelly, early on, we both bought off on this, but things are changing a little bit with the other services kind of coming on board to practice ministry, kind of like the Army does. But the Army 30 years ago, we were really the only ones that were kind of dirty boots, man. When you became a chaplain, you were out there with the troopers, and we deploy with them. We're out there with them. A lot of the other services, and they're turning from that a little bit, but they were a little bit more building based, chapel based. If you want to see me, come to the chapel. And I was a dirty boots guy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Awesome. So you felt that call to ministry. You made the right choice in pursuing the Army. So how did God confirm that call for you?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, great question. And I'm trying to keep this concise. So for an extrovert who wanted to take F's and didn't want to talk in front of people 30 plus years ago, I have a hard time shutting myself up now, but through numbers of different ways. Number one, when I came on active duty, I was still young for a chaplain. I was 27, but I had been in either part-time, mainly full-time ministry all through school and all through seminary. And so at 17, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I knew what it took to kind of get here with the ministry experience. And so like any other high achiever, 2 years wasn't enough. I was going to have more years. And so I hit it hard and loved the local church. But I did not know, I'm a Southern Baptist guy, and that, this is a different era 30 plus years ago. But the Southern Baptists, just being quite honest with you, looked at me, probably rightfully so, and said, you're too young. You need to find a bride, and you need to settle down a little bit. You've got way too much energy. Well, 30 some years later, I still have the same amount of energy, but I did find a bride.
That's right.
So, so that was one of the ways that I think the Lord confirmed that call for me was, just praying intensely. Lord, if this is what you want me to do, at that point I was single, then just open up the doors. And this is probably not the right language, but I was turned down 3 times to be accessioned on active duty. And looking back, it just wasn't the right time. The Lord knows when the right time is, but I certainly didn't think that then, and so, for all of you guys that may have tried to accession and it didn't work out at first, that doesn't mean give up. It just means keep pressing a little bit and see what the Lord's timing is. So within those 2 or 3 years that I had, tried to accession, I met Kelly, and a year or so later, after we courted, we were married, and it just so happened in that timing that we got married, and 2 months, was it 2 months later, came on active duty. And so that was all that to say that one of the ways that the Lord confirmed that we were on the right track was, he brought my spouse along, my partner in ministry.
Awesome. Well, that's a great segue. So Mrs. Croom, so what did you think? What was going through your mind when he came to you and said, "Hey, I want to be an Army chaplain"?
Yeah, Kelly, what you need to tell him.
Well, I grew up in a family where my my relatives served, but not while I was growing up. My dad was in the Navy for 3 years before even meeting my mother. My grandfather served in the military and the Army as well, but I didn't really know much about the military. It was kind of an odd anomaly. It was the Marine Corps guy who strolled through our high school, and I just couldn't understand why his jacket and his pants didn't match. I just thought that was a terrible color combination. And that was kind of all I knew about the military besides, saluting the flag. So meeting this military guy who was gung-ho, I couldn't understand how are you going to be Rambo and a pastor? And what is a chaplain anyway? I'd never heard that term or understood it. So I was in love with this guy. I was in love with the Lord, and I knew that he would make a way for us. And I was pleased as punch to marry him and join the Army, although I didn't really know what that meant.
Okay, full transparency, man. She's leaving something out. So, and full disclosure, because the reason I'm going to share this is because, and she knows I'm going to do it, but the reason I'm going to share this is because I think there's a lot of young married ministry couples that struggle with God's call and stuff. And so the Paul Harvey, the rest of the story on this piece was early on when we were dating, she didn't know what a chaplain was. At that point, I was part-time in a church as a singles minister. It was a pretty big church. And I was full-time at it was kind of I was a big brother / bouncer at a Christian ministry that dealt with troubled teens. So it actually prepared me real well for the military. And the church that was associated with this organization is where I met Kelly from. But listen, y'all, one of the first things Kelly said to me was, and when we were talking, and I hadn't really told her my plans yet. Number one, that I loved her and we were going to get married. She just didn't know that yet.
That's true.
But the other thing was, she literally looked at me and said, I could never marry a minister. My dad's a deacon and an elder, and man, that's a hard life, and I would never do that. And I will tell you, when she said that, I plummeted. I was like, God has forsaken me. But just to show you how the Lord's in the middle of that, a week or two later, when we sat down and talked, she said, okay, now I understand it. Let me dial back and tell you what I really meant. And here we are, 30 years later. So that's the rest of the story.
Yes. Thank you, Paul Harvey.
Very nice. No, that's great, because that's really important for some of our folks to hear, especially the spouses that are joining us here. So okay, so you find out about this whole ministry thing. You find out about the Chaplain Corps and that he wants to be a chaplain. So what are some of the big concerns that were going through your mind?
Well, and that was one of the reasons I said I would never marry a pastor. Here's the thing, Matt. I don't play the piano and I don't sing. So growing up in my church, the whole entire time I was raised was Mrs. Billingsley, and she had a doctorate, I think, in piano. She sat at the piano and led every service in worship, and her family had these beautiful voices. So how in the world am I going to be a pastor's wife when I'm terrified to even try to sing in the choir, to make a joyful noise? I didn't like to speak in public, and I probably still don't a whole lot, but I'm a lot more capable now. And I thought, surely at 19, 20 years old, I'm not even close to being prepared to lead a Bible study. So I felt like I had so many things against me, but what I had going for me was I knew I was committed to the Lord, and I knew I was committed to Keith. And if he was going in the Army, I was going in the Army, and we were going to make it a team thing.
Great. So you guys come into the Army, pretty young, coming on active duty, and then you've had, like I said, close to 30 years of experience here. So what have been some of the unique challenges that y'all have kind of faced together throughout this whole journey in ministry?
Man, that's a great question, Matt. So the very challenges that and again, we didn't rehearse this one, and so I'll be kind of anxious to see if Kelly agrees or has something else. But for me personally, the very things that that the chief, Chaplain Soljum, pushes, rightfully so, diversity, pluralism, all the constitutional stuff, all the stuff that makes us what we are as a nation, which I absolutely firmly agree with, or I wouldn't be a government employee / minister, but the very things that I agree with are also the things that challenge me a lot. Now, what I just mentioned, particularly, I'm talking about pluralism, right? And for many people, that's defined differently. The Army, if you haven't probably downloaded this and you're interested in being a chaplain, you probably need to download Army Regulation 165-1 and read it, because that's the secular Bible that we use that keeps us, between our left and right boundaries. And it's healthy because the very things that hold us together as a corps and I think as an Army are sometimes the very areas that you're stretched in. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes it's difficult when you are at theological, completely different ends of the spectrum with somebody. I mean, I'm a Southern Baptist dude, man. I want everybody to know Jesus, right? That's where I'm at. Now, am I going to cram that down anybody's throat? Of course not. That's not what we do. That's not what we're supposed to do. And that's fine. Do I share my faith? You doggone right I do, because that's who I am. And there's room for that. There's room for that in the military. And if somebody tells you different, then talk to the chief of chaplains, because Chaplain Soljum has a great balance on talking about staying true to your faith and recognizing other faith. And so, without elaborating anymore, just because of time, the very things that I treasure the most that the Army and the Corps has to offer are sometimes the most challenging, because we're not in the local church, right? Not everybody thinks exactly like you do. So I love it, but I'm also challenged by that a lot of times. Does that make sense? I don't know if I worded that quite right.
Yes, sir. It does. It does. It's that unique balance that we have in this very, very unique ministry that's unlike any other ministry out there.
I was 20 years old when Keith and I married. A few months later, came on active duty, and I, like Keith, was raised in a Southern Baptist church. So I knew my roots, I knew my faith, I knew my convictions, but I didn't know a lot about many other denominations, many other faith groups. I took a Religions in America class in college my freshman year. Passed the class, thank you very much. And as soon as the class was over, threw my notes away like I always do. And just a couple months later, I met my future husband. And once we realized we were coming into the chaplaincy, I thought, man, I really could have used those notes. But through the years, serving alongside other men and women of other faiths, of other denominations, of other faith persuasions, I've learned so much. I've grown deeper in my own faith, understanding my own beliefs better, but also I just love the beauty in the liturgy of our peers and how they worship and learn as well. So it's been a
Absolutely.
neat thing. But I did want to mention the question you asked, and I'm referring to my notes over here, where about some of the unique challenges, and I can't let it go by without saying, just the nomadic lifestyle we live can definitely be a challenge. It's also a huge adventure, but we've moved a whole lot. Another challenge is just raising kids. One of my biggest fears was, because I grew up in the same town, the same house, the same church with Mrs. Billingsley playing the piano beautifully. How are we going to be able to raise a family and give them roots? That was a scary thing for me. Where are they going to go to VBS? Where are they going to go to youth camp? You know, because I grew up the same place, same place, same place. And the Lord, through his mercy and grace, has given us roots in a different way, between going home to Nana and Papa's house, or a house that our family is able to use during the holiday season and Thanksgiving. We go to the cabin, and that's roots for us. And also we've returned a number of times back to where we are stationed right now in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And that's roots for us as well. We have hairdressers and dentists and doctors, and our kids have dear, dear friends, many of whom their parents have retired from the military and chosen to stay put right here in the Fayetteville area. So when we come back to Fort Bragg, we really do have those roots. So that was a big fear of mine as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of jumping on that. So from your perspective, what has been your favorite, your favorite place to be assigned?
I would say the most unique place was definitely Japan. We served for 3 years in Camp Zama, Japan, which is just about an hour south of Tokyo. When we initially got our orders, we made the quick assumption that we'd be serving in Okinawa with special operations, and quickly found out our orders read Camp Zama, which we had no idea where that was. And
didn't even know it existed.
And to be honest, our geography is not so sharp. So we kind of had to Google, hey, Japan's over there by China, but where is it exactly? So uniqueness, I would say Japan. How about you?
I would say the same, and you know, and I would just say this because Matt, you know, again, spice of life, we're all different, right? You know, but for me, my philosophy of ministry, and it has developed over the years, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday when we touched base, but my philosophy of ministry is, look, you know, we're all gonna, when those of you that are thinking about coming on board, you know, you're not going to get every assignment that you think you and your spouse want to go to. It's just not going to happen like that. Now, having said that, I talk to a lot of people that are like, oh man, we've gotten our first choice for the last 15 years. Well, I'm very envious of those people because it, you know, it just doesn't happen like that. So as quick as I tell you something that's a rule of thumb, you know, there are exceptions. So everybody's got to remember that. For me, my philosophy of ministry says, even if I don't necessarily want to go to that assignment, and I've made that clear with the right, you know, attitude of, hey, would there possibly be a better assignment for the situation with my family, or for, you know, for my, you know, looking at my career of having to knock schools out and this and that and the other, and the assignments folks say, no, this is where you're going. Well, my philosophy of ministry, my theology says, okay, Lord, you're sovereign. We're supposed to be there. Japan was one of those. I didn't really like the assignment I was going to, didn't have a real good history of people getting promoted out of my job. And from a common sense perspective, you know, you don't come into the Army to end up being a GO or a general officer or a full bird colonel or a lieutenant. I mean, you come in because you're following God's call. But all of us want to provide for our families. And so, like in any ministry position or job, you want to do your best to advance. That particular position, I didn't think was going to do that. Little did I know after we got there, it was exactly where we needed to be. And our children, who are all grown now, still talk about Japan. And one of them I didn't think was old enough to even remember it. So, you know, some of the most challenging times or places you'll have in the military will end up being the absolute best. Sometimes it's just hindsight, right?
Awesome. So you've had some very unique assignments. You've gotten to go some really cool places. So Chaplain Croom, could you tell us what you currently do for the Chaplain Corps?
Yeah, sure. So my present assignment right now is I'm assigned at the United States Army Special Operations Command, which sounds super great, and it is. It's I think the last three jobs I've had have been the best jobs I've ever had in the Army, and so and I'm drawn to a close. So I only have one more assignment after this, and then Chaplain Soldier is going to say it's time for you to go home, pal. But the present assignment I'm in, I'm the head chaplain for Special Operations Command, which means I've got several unit ministry teams that serve underneath me on the technical chain. Right, we all work for commanders, not chaplains. And so I'm kind of their technical supervisor when it comes to different things, and they're spread out throughout the whole world. I mean, if you pick up a rock and throw it and hit another country, we are probably have a chaplain close by there and a religious affairs specialist. And so I take a lot of pride in this job. I serve a great commander, Lieutenant General Fran Beaudet. Not only is he a great leader, I consider him a personal friend, which a lot of times is not the case when you're working for bosses. You don't have to like them, they don't have to like you, but you got a mission to complete. I just happen to love he and Liz Beaudet, and so we're riding a highway right now, and so that's my job presently. And we've got a lot of special operations folks at Fort Bragg, but we also have a lot spread out all over the U.S. and abroad. So it's a big job that I carry a phone around all the time, and typically get a lot of calls at night. But that's one of the things that Kelly and I both agreed upon, that when we took this job, we would do our best.
His phone is literally
and my
buzzing
phone's
right
ringing
now.
right now. So, but anyway, there's a lot more that I could say about the job, but just to say this, my attitude, I've always tried to say my present job I'm in is going to be the best job I've had in the Army. And I think some of it is perspective, right? And so, but I really believe that on this one. So
So one of the questions that we get kind of frequently from some of our younger applicants, they see special operations, they really want to go into special operations, and they want to know what are the characteristics that the Corps is looking for specifically in chaplains that are going to serve in special operations.
So ironically, when I saw that question, I went to my notes and refreshed myself of what I tell a lot of the younger chaplains. I try to drink a lot of coffee, and I try to drink a lot of coffee anyway.
That's true.
But I love to get together with the young chaplains, sometimes not younger than me biologically, but younger in rank and certainly being in the military. And I just love to give them the platform and hear their heart and them talk. And I get this question a lot. So here is, I'm going to run down a list very quickly, just because I think it's important. But here's what I would also tell folks. This isn't just your special operations chaplains. These are good chaplains, period, in any formation. It just so happens it's a little bit more highlighted in the soft community. But and I see some senior chaplains out there, and I will tell you, I think this will ring true with any formation, but particularly in ours. So they've got to be mature. They've got to be self-starters. I most definitely, if I could name one trait that chaplains must have, it would be humility. I think that's extremely important. They got to be teachable, good pastoral identity, solid in their faith, healthy family. They need to have high emotional intelligence. They need to be discerning, creative, a team player, able to do ministry in the middle of nowhere, with countries that I didn't even know existed. They need to be problem solvers, good physical shape, good people skills. I could go on and on, but that's really the main list that we, meaning the personnel folks, and a little bit of input that as a senior chaplain I have in picking folks. That's what I look for.
So with those sort of in mind, those list of characteristics, why are those important? So like, what are some of those unique challenges that chaplains are going to face in that community?
Sure. Yeah. So, the special operations community, they were engaged in this war on terror before it started, and they will be engaged with it after it's quote over. And so it's a lot of time away from home, multiple months out of the year. And although chaplains don't bear arms and go to the front lines and shoot people, that's absolutely not our job. We are around in the soft community, around that all the time. And so they've got to be, some of the challenges is you've got to come home and say, hey, I can't really tell you where I'm going, but I'm going to be gone for a couple months. And you'll read about it on the news, but I got to get on a plane in 2 hours. Now that doesn't happen all the time, multiple times a year, but it does happen. And so, it can, one of the challenges is it can put a strain on your family. And so your spouse has to be on board with taking that assignment. And one of the things that we like to do when we can is talk to the spouse, and at least say, hey, do you have buy-in on this? Because this is going to be ramped up a little bit more than some of the other assignments. So I would just say places that they serve, i.e. after they get to their unit, when they go out with the special operations folks, not on missions, but supporting those missions, with their ability to practice religious liberty in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's pretty cool when you're in a country that you're not really invited to, but we go because somebody invited us there, and we're going to send a chaplain to go talk to a 12-man team, send them thousands and thousands of miles away just to show them how important they are, not only to the chaplain individually, but to the nation. And so that one dude gets to go out there and give them a worship service or encourage them or provide a worship service, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whatever flavor you are, the chief of chaplains expects you to be that flavor and be a good one. And if I can't provide or perform for somebody that's, not of my faith, then I better doggone figure out how I'm going to, get them taken care of. And that's part of the challenge in the soft community is taking care of all of our people. But we do a good job doing it. So creativity is important.
We say special operations is a fast moving train and you just kind of have to jump on. And I know that is similar with other units as well. But one of the unique characteristics of special operations is many times there'll be more frequent deployments, but they'll be shorter in time. I prefer that much over a lengthy deployment and fewer. I'd rather have him come in and out of the home as quick as he can, go and do ministry downrange, which is his favorite thing to do in the world, and then come back to the family a little more frequently. The other unique thing about special operations, specifically speaking for our special forces groups, is that our soldiers many times will be assigned to a group and stay there 6, 8, 10, 12 years. So we as a chaplain family bounce in and out every couple of years, but we're coming to a group of people who know each other and love each other and have strong connections. There's not a lot of in and out. So that is a unique part and a challenge about special operations as well.
So kind of moving a little bit into this idea of a family. What makes a good, solid chaplain family? And I know that's kind of a big question. That's sort of maybe a loaded question in some ways. But from y'all's perspective, what do you think makes a good, solid chaplain family?
We were talking about this last night and really wanted to touch on this. So I'm so glad you asked the question, Max. It was on the list. But for us, the idea of having a missionary mindset is super important. We have so many friends who are chaplains or were chaplains, have retired now. But prior to that military ministry, they were actually on the mission field. We haven't had that experience. But we try to take the ideas of what would we do if we were on that mission field, maybe in Africa or Europe, and overlay it with how would we be a missionary to the military. As Southern Baptists, our endorser, our denomination sees us as missionaries.
Mhm.
That's our title. But the idea of living among the people, shopping where they shop, learning their unique language, all those
Mhm.
military acronyms are very challenging.
Mhm.
And as Keith is assigned from unit to unit, those acronyms change. You know, in an infantry, it's a battalion. In the artillery, it's a squadron, right? Got it. Yeah. But just the idea of being among the people, worshiping where they worship. So for our family, that means definitely worshiping in a chapel. That means I'm shopping at
Mhm.
the commissary or the grocery store with them. I'm shopping at the PX. Um, all these things because we want to live our life among our unit people, and make ourselves available to them, just as I would assume someone who's on the mission field
Mhm.
in a foreign country.
Yeah, we want to be all in. And you know, it's just like if you're going to invest in something, you're going to have to pour some money into it, man. You're going to have to do some research, and you know, and you don't go into it blindly. Maybe it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, but you do your homework, and you know, you do your research, and we're all in. And I would say for all of you guys and gals out there that are thinking about coming into the military chaplaincy, don't do it half-hearted. You be all in. Come in, do it 100%, and if the Lord directs you somewhere else after 2, 3, 4 years, and then be faithful and follow His calling. I mean, we had no clue we'd be in this thing this long. I mean, frankly, I've wanted to resign several times, and frankly have, and that's a whole nother story. But full transparency, right? You're not going to be happy for 30 years, but that's not my theology. Have I been joyful? Have I had that internal joy that I'm following God's call? Absolutely. But just like you're in the local church or a local ministry, you're not happy all the time. There's some frustration that comes with that. We're human, you know. Some chaplains I don't like, and they don't like me. That's just it's the way it is, you know. And so you work with each other, and I mean, there's just so much more good that comes from this unique ministry than I could ever express in the time we have now. Than there are challenges. But Kelly is absolutely right. Is for us, it's that missionary mindset. And so part of that for me, Matt, is important because you're not a local pastor, man. Very few people are going to go up to their local pastor and drop the F bomb in a normal sentence. They're just not going to do it. You know, I mean, that never happened to me. And if it did happen, I was super surprised. Well, you know, you better brace for impact if that's your expectation coming to the military, because these people that you're going to be around, they're normal people. They're not trying to impress you. They're just trying to survive. And they want you to enter into their world and try to survive with them. But they are going to be who they are. And I would have it no other way, because they are the real deal, man. And that's what they need to see out of their chaplain and spouse and their families. You know, we used to say when our kids were in the house, look, man, you just don't get one Croom, you get 4 Crooms, like it or not. And so we're just all in, and it's that missionary mindset. You know, you almost can't offend me. There's nothing. I mean, maybe there's a few things. If you attack my faith, we're gonna have a problem with that. But as far as just the way people act and what they speak, you can't offend me, because I'm going to speak freely too. And they may not like what I say. It may be a little bit too much for them, but guess what? Probably going to be healthier than them using 4-letter words. So it's accepting everybody for where we're at. And that's true pluralism. That is genuine ministry. And obviously you can tell we're still passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that passion is very inspiring. And thank you guys for being so honest and open with our candidates here, with all of our people that are considering a call to the Army chaplaincy. So we talked a little bit about some of those characteristics for the chaplains. What are the things that they need to develop? The things that the Chaplain Corps is looking for them in certain assignments. But Mrs. Croom, could you talk a little bit about being a good chaplain spouse? What are the characteristics that he or she needs to kind of develop in order to be able to kind of adjust to this different world,
Yeah, Kelly.
Well, you don't have to play the piano and you don't have to sing. So good on you if you do. Those men here who are watching.
Kelly's jealous.
If you're married and if your spouse sings and plays the piano, I'm thrilled for them. And I appreciate all the nods I'm seeing on the screen. That's helpful. But I did write a couple things down, Matt, when I read your question. And first, I just want to say that the Lord can use any of us and any of our personalities, introvert, extrovert, meek, mild, loud, and rambunctious. And I truly believe that any of our personalities can be used beautifully in the military lifestyle. Yeah. So I would say there's no cookie cutter answer for what makes a good or the perfect military chaplain spouse. Looking at the names and the faces here on this screen, I'm reminded of my friends. A lot of them are chaplains' wives that I know and love dearly and have had the honor of spending time. And they're so unique and different and wonderful. Some are quiet, some are loud and vivacious, some are great cooks, some are not great cooks. And I'm in that category, but praise God for them helping me along the way and helping me grow up. But a couple of things that I would say would be beneficial would be to have a sense of adventure. I'm a list maker. I love to make lists and check them off. If 26 years ago when Keith and I married, if I could have planned life the way I would have wanted it, I would have loved to have had just a little list of where the Lord through the Army was going to send us and what our life would be like and where we would live and the houses we would rent and when we would have our kids. I'm just that kind of a person. So having a sense of adventure and flexibility, I would say is pretty important. And I've learned to live that way and not stress out about change because it comes for sure. It's not a matter of if, but when. Yeah. And I know those of you who are in the military or were in the military will agree with that. And the other thing is about just the sense of community and communication, a willingness to build relationships. That's so important. I love going into a unit and just becoming friends with the spouses. Yeah. I don't feel like it's my job to be their chaplain. That's my husband's job. It's my job to be their friend. And when I build relationships with them and friendships and we walk together and talk together and text and stuff stockings and wrap gifts and have Easter parties and do family readiness meetings together, then they'll come to me when they have needs or hurts or wants or crisis. And it's not because I'm the chaplain's wife necessarily, but it's because they're my friend. Your friend. Yeah. And it's just a great place to be. So adventurous and a relationship builder, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So so in just a couple minutes here, we're going to transition and let some people ask some questions. So we're going to challenge you on that offending thing a little bit, sir.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is just at this time, I'm going to encourage you guys, if you all have questions, if you're thinking about things that you want to ask the Crooms, if you would type those into that chat and we'll go through and get to as many of them as we can here in just a minute, but be thinking of some things that you want to ask them and we'll go to that in just a second. So kind of just a few more questions for you here. How do you prepare a family for coming on active duty? And I know it's probably a little bit different for you guys because you're both young and didn't have kids at the time when you came on active duty, but you've got a lot of experience now with it. What are some things that you wish you had known back then?
There we go.
I'll go first and then you can add to it.
All
How
right.
about that? Like you said, we did not have kids when we came on to active duty and we were newlyweds. Keith had been serving in the National Guard as a chaplain for a number of years before we came on active duty. But I would say with children specifically, I feel like the attitude that Keith and I have about our next duty station or our next big change or our next assignment or dad's next deployment is so important for our household.
Yeah.
And not that we fake it, because we're real around our kids, and we know how painful and hard all these things are. Moving and deploying and changes, assignment changes, and maybe, like Keith said, maybe we didn't get our number one assignment that we would have preferred to get, but the attitude that we have, the sense of adventure that we have, has been super important to me to portray excitement and joy, even though there's pain, of course, for our kids, pain in leaving their dearest friends. That's been the hardest part, with lots of tears, but promising them and knowing that the Lord has a plan for us at our next duty station, just like he's had at this duty station. The Lord's brought friends for each of us at every single duty station. I think back to the Tashas and the Joys and the Kims and the Brendas and the Dianes and the Dawns, that he's brought me. And we talk to our boys about, it's like those stones of remembrance, all the things he's done for us in the past, that we can say, hey, he's not going to stop doing things for us in the future as we move on. So I'm going to get teary-eyed if I don't stop talking. So can you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Kelly's right. And really big picture for us is, and again, look, every family has to figure this out with kids. I mean, again, Matt, to reiterate what we kind of talked about yesterday, the way that we do things is not right for everybody. We get that. There's different philosophies of ministry, right? You know, the kids or families come in the military, your kids are older. Some people come in the military, you don't have kids yet. Some are super small, some have special needs. So, I mean, it's just, you name the situation, and we get that. So what we're saying is what has worked for us. Every family, every couple has to decide what's kind of right within those left and right boundaries of what's acceptable to the military, right? And so, but I will say for us, and this is part of our philosophy of ministry, is, look, our kids couldn't pick their parents. And so, not their fault that we're in the military, but it is our fault allowing them to have a bad attitude or a different attitude than what is acceptable in our family for being ministry-minded people. And so within reason, sometimes we didn't give our kids a choice. Hey, you're going to wake up and you're going to go set 300 chairs out at the chapel, because that's what we do, and you're going to break them down too, by the way, and then maybe I'll feed you, and so, and not necessarily a dictatorship, but we wanted our kids to experience the good and the challenging, because that's what makes you healthy adults. That's what makes you, give back to society and be a good citizen and love the red, white, and blue, and, respect authority. And hopefully, from the Christian perspective, we've demonstrated having quiet times and praying together, and how that faith just meshes perfectly with serving, God first and country. And so for us, it's a little bit more than just, hey, we want our kids to be good people. No, I mean, we wanted them to embrace our ministry, which became their ministry. And so far, we don't have any axe murders. They're pretty healthy kids. And I know, listen, there's some aspect with, and we only have two, but there's some aspect that I keep going, okay, Lord, one of them's got to do something really, really stupid at some point. And I'm not trying to be funny, but, the Lord has been very gracious to us with our children. And we've gone through the normal stupid stuff with kids and young adults and all that. But big picture, you're kind of shooting from the hip a lot with a military family with so much change. And so we've just tried to be grounded in our faith, speak truth to our kids, listen to their frustrations, bend when we can. You know what? Okay, I understand you don't want to go there, and it's a good reason, because it's your senior year in high school. I'm one person with 500,000 people in the Army, but I'm going to ask a question because I love you, and we'll see if we can stay here. And then, so you value your family, you try to do the right thing, but at the end of the day, you realize from the Christian perspective, you serve a sovereign God, and your kids are a part of that family nucleus, not necessarily have the final say. And so I don't think you're ever going to get above challenges in the military. It's just the way it is. But so here's what I would say: communicate, communicate, communicate. We've probably been too open with our children and given them way too much say. But that has served us well, and we don't have bitter children. We have kids that communicate, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And so, that's what's worked for us.
It's some great advice. We really appreciate that, because I know that as I'm looking through the list of some of our folks that are applying and some that have just gotten picked up, they're wrestling with that. Like, how do we deal with this with the kids? And they've got kids at various different stages. So as kind of coming to the end of it, I'm just going to ask you a couple quick more questions here. So what advice do you have for anybody that is considering a call to the Army chaplaincy?
Let me go. I would just say research it, man. I mean, it doesn't seem like a real spiritual answer, but research it. I mean, Google it. Talk to guys that are in the Guard and the reserves and on the active duty. I mean, Matt, that's your job, right? I mean, you need to be a listening ear to these guys, and I know you are. I mean, which, by the way, man, thanks for your ministry, because this is, you're raising the bar for sure, and just the exposure that you're getting from doing these webinars is just awesome. And so, the folks that are on here, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You're counting the cost, you're researching it, you're pulling your spouse into it, hopefully your kids, and talk to the kids. Hey, listen, we may be heading in this direction. What do you guys think? And I mean, pull them into it, give them buy-in, and so, research it, educate yourself. We've already said this, but ask others, and count the costs. And I would say, lastly, I mean, there's a million things you could say about this, but do some self-analysis, some self-awareness. Look in the mirror and say, God, how have you gifted me? I am fearfully and wonderfully made. What are your plans for me? Am I a pretty physical person? Do I like to stay in shape? Because if you're not, that may be a little marker. You may want to look at that. Because you're going to spend umpteen years in the Army where that's a really important thing. The Army doesn't like hair, and they don't like, extra weight. And so you just that's the reality of it. Right now, that doesn't mean if you like hair and you're a little overweight, you should chuck the military chaplaincy. But what it means is, that's an area that's going to be improved. You're going to have to improve. Military chaplains also do a lot of speaking in front of people. And so if you're one of those ones like I was early on, I really don't like to speak, you're going to be challenged in that, because you're going to be expected to speak some. And so just realize as much as you can what you're getting yourself into, and prepare. And then, just like I play golf, grip it and rip it, and let the Lord take over and go for it.
And I would say, for those of you who are married or are considering being married, maybe engaged now, or have a special someone, that it's important to talk to that special someone. Yes. Because for Keith and I, like we've said before, it is a team ministry. Yes. It's a family ministry. Yeah. It's not just the two of us, but it's our kids as well. And having a spouse or fiance that is all in to the ministry is yes. ever so important. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't have a career, because right. I have so many unit ministry team friends Absolutely. Who are full-time employed. I have others who don't. We're full-time volunteers, and both of those are great, and both of those are allowable, and
yeah, there's room for that's right.
You. Yeah, there's room for both of those. But I would say that if your spouse or your future spouse is not committed to the idea of serving in the military or the chaplaincy, that would also perhaps be a flag.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
A strong flag. So yeah. if you can find someone that spouse can talk to, your wife or your husband, and really ask their questions. I wish we had a webinar back 27 years ago, before we were married, and when we were talking about the chaplaincy. I wish I had someone beyond Mrs. Billingsley, who played the piano and sang beautifully, that I could say, what in the world does that mean? What can I do? How can I help serve alongside my husband? And am I crazy for saying yes to this guy?
Yeah.
Well, be careful what you wish for, because this is streaming on Facebook Live right now. So you might have a ton of people that are watching this that are going to look you up on Facebook and start asking you questions.
Yeah, there you go.
So Mrs. Croom, could you just kind of as our last question here, what would you like to say to the spouses? Like what advice can you give to some of these spouses of the applicants? I mean, you've already shared so much, but any final ones that you can share?
I would just let them know that this was so far out of any hope or dream or thought that I had as I graduated from high school and headed off to college. But the Lord chose Keith and the Lord chose me for this perfect ministry. And I'm just so thrilled to be a part of it. And as we're on the downhill slope of many, many years in a career, it's going to be sad when the time comes to end it. But gosh, what a blessing it's been. So as best you can, don't be afraid of it. Embrace it and get ready for a wonderful adventure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, so those are the questions that I had. And so for those of you that don't know, whenever we do these things, I give our guests kind of a heads up of things that I'm going to ask, because I don't want to be like one of those journalists that tries to like dig and catch you. But this is part of the webinar where I have no control, really. These are the questions that we've gotten from some people. So I'm going to throw a few out at you here, and we'll get to as many as we have time for today. So I got one question here from the Reeds. They're asking, what's the difference between reserves and active duty? But they also asked the second question here that I think is really, really good that I'd like you guys to address. Is there an age for your kids that you think it would be too hard to transition from reserves to active duty?
Gosh, that's a great question. So I've got an opinion on that. But we didn't go through that, right? And so, take what we're saying as a grain of salt. So I'm in the minefield right now talking with no experience. And so I'm going to own that. But I would answer that based on my own theology. Your job as adults and people of ministry is to be obedient to what the Lord's called you to be obedient to. He'll make a way for your family. If I didn't believe that, I would have never come into the Army. And so I would, again, I know that's kind of black and white. Look, being a special operations dude, chaplain, we operate in a gray area sometimes. And I think in the ministry, you got to operate in a gray area sometimes. I mean, you put a strain on our families, right? And how hard do we push? How hard do we pull? When do we go up? When do we go down? When do we go left, right? Do I go to that church? You name it. There's questions out there. So I would just say, that's why I would step back. I would pray through that stuff, and I would let the Lord decide that. And some of it is the leading of the Lord as an educated guess, right? And it just is, that we're supposed to be obedient. You're faithful to your spouse. You be the best parent you can to your children. You're feeding your own soul. And if you are doing all that and you are feeling a leading in one direction or the other, a call, so to speak, then you better be obedient to that call. Because if you're not, I think you're going to be in more trouble with the kids than you would if you were obedient. And I know that's very simple, but if God's called you to do something, then I promise you, He will make a way, and He will make everything okay. I think I've read many stories through Genesis and Revelation that's the case. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It certainly hasn't been easy for us. There are many more stories that we could have shared that you would go, oh my goodness, that is jacked up. I can't believe that happened. But it was all under God's will and under the umbrella of Him caring for our families. And so I don't know if that really answered that.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. So here's another one for you. This is kind of good. So what's the greatest challenge for you transitioning into special operations? And then right after that, the question, what was your sketchiest jump?
Sketchiest jump.
So I'll answer the first question. I'll answer the second one. There's really not a transition for me. So what a lot of people don't understand, because a lot of the active duty people look at my career and think, oh, the special operations, you've been in that a lot. Well, I have, but I've also been in a lot of other units. I'm a clinical pastoral education guy. I love hospital ministry. I love being in a fixed facility. I love being in the, Father McCahey in the combat support hospitals. That's been my favorite assignment, has been in the 28th Cash. General Bodette, if you're watching this, I love soft. So, but that's just the case. So, spice of life, it's variety, and I think that's important. So there's really no transition from one unit to the next. It's just philosophy of, it's knowing my audience. It's knowing if I'm in a logistics unit, okay, I've got this particular mindset. If I'm in a particular soft unit, I know that mindset. My father was one. I do my homework, I Google, I talk to other people, and then I go in there with an open mind, and do a lot of listening. So my sketchiest jump,
I think I know it.
What?
Let me tell.
All
Let
right.
me tell if I'm right. Keith visited not Yuma, Key West, Florida.
Yes.
Where our military does scuba school, so dive school. And he was given the opportunity to jump out of a Chinook, which has a platform, a ramp that goes down like this, and you just walk off the end of it. But the DZ, or the drop zone, is called Shark DZ, because you're at the tip of the Keys and there's sharks swimming around.
Mhm.
So is that the one you would have said? That's
Yeah.
For me, that would have been the scariest thing ever.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, so that's one of two. And I would say probably with that, I got a chance to go to the Army skydiving school, and on my first jump, you're supposed to go face down to the earth and stabilize. And I thought I was doing that. Long story short, I was completely upside down stable, but didn't realize that because I was freaking out a little bit. And so the instructor had to come in and pull the ripcord for me. And when I hit the ground, I was, it was kind of like, what the heck did you do that for? And he said, well, look, I'm going to pass you because you were stable, but you were just upside down. So I needed to flip you over so you wouldn't panic. And so if anybody's familiar with skydiving, that's definitely not the way you want to be. So that dawned on me, man, this stuff is dangerous, and so that was a little bit of a sketchy jump, but all under the umbrella of ministry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's great. And I've had a couple jumps that, if you ever get to jump out of Hawaii, it's an interesting experience.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, okay, another one from Bill and Deanna. My wife and I have often began counseling, mentoring young or troubled couples by inviting them into our home to share a meal and build relationships. Is this something that you have been able to do, and has your rank ever caused hindrance for young enlisted personnel?
You want to answer, or you want me to?
We definitely had the opportunity to pour into younger soldiers and their spouses. Even we live on our military installation now, and a lot of times the housing areas will be based on rank. And so we happen to be in an 06 housing on that street, but one street over is not 06 housing, and it's mid-grade enlisted housing. And I've been able to become great friends with some of those gals just through spending time, going on walks, walking the dog, picking up pecans during pecan season, etc. But it's funny how when they're going on walks and with their husbands and they happen to bump into us, the first couple of times it's an awkward scenario. It seems like for them it's more the soldier is a little unnerved or a little nervous based on the rank of my husband, but quickly they see that we're super fun and and just neighbors. And so that's definitely been a recent experience here in our neighborhood. What about you?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. There's many opportunities to open up your house and have people in. I mean, it's limitless. It's, whatever's best for your family. And now, and that's seasons of life, right? I mean, there was a time where we felt like we kind of needed to circle the wagons and protect our kids a little bit and ourselves as far as energy levels. So we didn't ask as many people over then. And then there's other times that, you do the combo check and everybody gives you a thumbs up and you're like, let's open the house up and have people over. And so I think it's kind of seasonal, right? You go through seasons in your family that you need to withdraw a little bit, and other times where you're like, let's have some people over, and I think that needs to be okay.
That was a great question, Bill and Deanna, and thank you for the smiles throughout this webcast and the support. It's very helpful instead of just staring at a blank screen.
Okay, so what do you do? This is from Aaron. What do you do on day one of the chaplaincy with your unit? Do you sit down with the commander and brief him or her? Do you walk around and meet people? You sit back and just wait? What do you do on day one?
That's a great question. And I would say what I personally would do is again, within reason, right? But that technical boss, that chaplain supervisor, and if you're a new guy coming in or gal, you're going to have a major chaplain at some point, group chaplain, brigade chaplain, squadron, whatever you call it, that 04 chaplain that you technically on the technical side will answer to. Hopefully he or she has wrapped their arm around you beforehand and they can kind of guide you. But I would find my chaplain technical chain boss and sit down with him or her and just say, hey, what do I do? And if they're not around, then I think going up to the command suite or whatever your particular unit calls it is a great place to start, just to introduce yourself to the head shed, the headquarters, and say, hey, I'm the new chaplain, and just be seen. What we're taught. I think they're still teaching it, ministry of presence. I think that's important.
Well, we got time. We've been going for over an hour here, and I know that you guys are very busy. I'm going to ask one more question that we got from somebody here. This is, how many assignments does a chaplain need before moving into a soft UMT? Should they be air assault or airborne qualified?
Yeah, great question. And so this kind of changes based on the needs, but I think stereotypically you can count on, you need at least one assignment underneath you. And then the assignments folks and the chief kind of lets us put the feelers out and see who we think would be a good take on that. And then we can kind of draw them in. I mean, look, I think if you can have air assault and airborne, it's just, it's ministry opportunities. So go for it. That's not a prerequisite all the time to come into soft, but a jump wings, if you don't have them, you're going to have them if you come over. But really, if your present unit can get you there, that's even better.
Great. Well, thank you all. We've got some other ones that are kind of more technical questions that I know some of our recruiters are answering right now. But I just want to thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you so much. It is, Mrs. Croom, it's been great having you here specifically because I know that we have lots of spouses that have questions and a lot of folks that don't come from military backgrounds that just really don't know what to expect. And I know that having you here has been just a huge help. And I'm glad that you all suggested that because I think that this is going to be very helpful for a lot of people. And just watch out on Facebook because people are going to come find you.
Okay. I receive it. I'm open to that. Like I said, I wish I had someone like that
Yes.
many years ago, and I would love to chat further and answer questions and build a relationship. Just for the spouses who are curious, if their spouse chooses to come into the Army chaplaincy, we have Facebook pages galore for chaplain spouses and unit ministry team spouses where there's ways to connect and ask questions and let your hair down, so to speak, and just be real. Some of that is through prayer request or, hey, I had this scenario, can you give me input? And that's just a huge blessing. So there are
Yes.
ways to get questions answered on the virtual side as well as just picking up the phone.
Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to impose on you real quick, if I could, Chaplain Croom. Would you mind closing us out in prayer and just praying for these applicants, praying for these folks that are considering a call to ministry that,
Absolutely.
God would make it clear for them?
Absolutely. Listen, thanks for the opportunity, Matt. You're doing great work. You really are. And I just have a lot of respect for you, and God bless you for doing that, man. And all you who are considering the Army chaplaincy, I am thrilled for you. And it's just, there's no better ministry out there. So let me pray for you. Lord, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for every person who's tuned in and who will see this in the future. I just pray that they will see genuineness in our call, your call for our lives, and hopefully their call. And so, God, it's not about how long we serve. It's not about where we serve as far as units. It's about being obedient to you. And I pray that each individual will find their specific call on their life, because we have one. And I'm so grateful for that. So God, I pray a blessing on every person here within earshot today, that you will guide them and direct them in the ministry that you would have for them. And Lord, make it completely 100% clear if they're supposed to move into this ministry. And if they're already here, encourage them, help them know how much you love them, and how much this is just such a blessing and just a great ministry to be involved in. And so, God, we thank you for who you are in all of our lives. And I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.